It was announced a week ago that the New York Giants were going to go out there and bring back their head coach, Brian Dable, and also Joe Schoen, the general manager with this team. Joe Schoen is the person that you see right now on your screen. I'm going to be putting a lot of faces with names in this video, just in case you don't know who these guys are. But I do want to start off with Joe Schoen in this video. Joe Schoen was granted to go out there and make the tough decision with Daniel Jones. Why do I call it a tough decision? Well, a couple of years ago, when Brian Dable first became the head coach with the New York Giants, they made the NFL playoffs that season. And the reason why it was a tough decision, they declined the fifth-year option with Daniel Jones. So at that point in time, if you wanted to retain him after the season that he went out there and made the playoffs, you have to go out there and franchise tag him. And that was not an option for the New York Giants. It was also another dark cloud hovering over this decision. Saquon Barkley was up for a contract extension. So you had to pick someone, franchise this player, or go out there and sign this player to a long-term deal. Well, in this league, you always pick the quarterback, even if they are mediocre, because it is so hard to find talent at that position, especially if you don't have a top draft pick. And with the New York Giants, you guys guessed it, they did not have a top draft pick in that year's draft class because they made the playoffs. And not only just that, they defeated the Minnesota Vikings in that playoff game. So Joe Schoen went with Daniel Jones and they franchise tagged Saquon Barkley. And it was a tough decision for the general manager. Now, I do not envy his position, but they made a crucial mistake because just the next season, we will see Daniel Jones take a massive step back from the progression that he took in year number one with Brian Dable, and his season will be cut short due to ACL injury. But Saquon Barkley went out there and he balled out. We all know how this movie ended. Daniel Jones ended up getting cut at the middle point of this season. They moved on from him. He wanted to be released. They had the man on scout team as a safety. And Saquon Barkley went to a division rival in the Philadelphia Eagles, and he was statistically the best running back in the league this year. When I look at Joe Schoen, and I look at the draft classes, and I look at the misses, and I look at the Daniel Jones situation, and I don't fault all of that Daniel Jones situation on him because he did not select Daniel Jones. That was a previous administration. Joe Schoen should have been fired. You can stick with Brian Dable because this is some of the best football that we have ever seen from Daniel Jones in his career in this league because you made the playoffs. He did the best that he could with Daniel Jones and the lack of talent on the offensive line. It was really Daniel Jones and the legs of Saquon Barkley that got them over the top. And I do feel for Joe Schoen and Brian Dable, you're still dealing with a lot of bad pieces from the previous administration. When Dave Gettleman came out and he said, hey, I want to go out there and build this offensive line. We need to bring in a bunch of guys up front to help out our quarterback. They haven't done that. They've went out there, they've drafted the guys, and they tried to go out there and get Daniel Jones a true number one wide receiver. They went out there and they got Kenny Golladay. Well, Kenny Golladay was a terrible player from jump, a very good player with the Detroit Lions, but he got his money from the New York Giants and he forgot how to catch. So as soon as Brian Dable came down to being the head coach, he said, I'm done with this. We're going to sit him down. Then we're going to cut him after this season. And that's what they did. So Brian Dable is a no-nonsense head coach. And I do believe that he has a lot of good play calls on the field with Daniel Jones. He just could not put the football there. And he was just an average starter at best. And we saw that when they made the playoffs. But when I look at Joe Schoen, that decision is a fireable offense. But it's more than just that decision with Daniel Jones that scares me about the future with this organization. As long as Joe Schoen is calling the shots to draft the players and control the players in free agency. You see, not only did Saquon Barkley walk away and go to the Philadelphia Eagles, a division rival, Xavier McKinney, who has been a very good safety for many years now with the New York Giants, especially with Wink Martindale. I have a lot to say about this defense in the next couple minutes. But when I look at Xavier McKinney this season, he's one of the best safeties. You can say that he was the best safety. He had the second most interceptions in the league next to Kirby Joseph, the Detroit Lions safety. And he was with the New York Giants. You had the chance to go out there and extend him, but you didn't. Your two best players left in free agency, and they're thriving right now with different teams. That speaks a lot about the ownership with the New York Giants and just the culture in general. This is not a good organization, and it's been like this over the last decade or so. And it's more than just the players on the field. John Mara has been a terrible owner. He is so incompetent in terms of going out there and hiring the right guys in the front office and hiring the right coaches. Remember, Daniel Jones, his entire career was not coached around Brian Dable in this administration. He had Joe Judge as a head coach. And not only just that, he had Jason Garrett as an offensive coordinator. And Joe Judge is a special teams coach at best, and Jason Garrett should never be an offensive mind in this league. Even though he did have success with the Dallas Cowboys, he was a terrible offensive coordinator from the jump. So you surrounded Daniel Jones with no offensive line talent, no true number one wide receiver until his last year, and his last year was with Malik Neighbors, and you had him with terrible coaching all around. I feel for Daniel Jones. He was never going to be a star with the New York Giants, and I also look at it from this situation. The only reason why he was selected in the first round is because he had a very close relationship with Peyton and Eli Manning, and we know that John Mara loves the Manning family. But when I look at the draft picks with Joe Schoen, because I'm not done with him just yet, in 2022, this is the first draft that we got to see underneath Joe Schoen. Kayvon Thibodeau, very good pass rusher. He's a solid pass rusher. He hasn't lived up to expectations just yet. I'm not calling him a bust, but we saw his rookie season. He only had 40 pressures on 409 snaps. In 2023, 43 pressures on 520 snaps. So when I look at it from this situation with Kayvon Thibodeau can go out there. He can get you double-digit sacks. The pressure rate has to be higher. And he missed majority of this season dealing with a wrist injury. And we heard about this when he was coming out of Oregon. When the motor is high, he's a very good football player. He could be the best defensive player in the league. One of. But when the motor is low, you see how bad he can be at times. They need more consistency out of him. I'm not saying that he's a bust, but he has not been that generational talent at that pass rushing position. And Joe Schoen did make a right decision to go out there and trade a second and a fifth round pick to bring in Brian Burns, the defensive end from the Carolina Panthers. And he had a solid season this season. Trust me, when I talk more about this defense, when I talk about Shane Bowen, you got to get a clearer picture of what I'm talking about. But it's more than just Kayvon Thibodeau in the first round. He also selected Evan Neal in 2022. Evan Neal is one of the worst starting offensive linemen. They gave up on him this season. They had to place him back out there because Andrew Thomas went down with an injury. And they went out there in free agency and they brought in Jermaine. Jermaine and Andrew Thomas, they were a solid tackle duo. Obviously, Andrew Thomas is still one of the best tackles in this league when he's 100% healthy. But Evan Neal, and he hasn't even played 4 years just yet in this league. He is a terrible player, and they've already given up on him. They've tried him at different positions in training camp. It's just not working out. And that's a bad decision with Joe Schoen. I understand that Alabama, he was a very good football player, but coming over to the New York Giants, he's been downright terrible. And for him to be benched this early in his career, that says a lot about him. You also look at Josh Azudu. This was just a terrible pick also. He's another offensive lineman. So you're not hitting on your offensive lineman, and this is a rebuilding team. This was the first draft class for Joe Schoen, and it doesn't paint a very bright future with this team in terms of going out there and finding the right offensive lineman. And Josh Azudu at the time was a very interesting pick. He's not even a backup offensive lineman with this team. He's a third string at best. You think that Evan Neal is bad? Look at Josh Azudu on the field. You also look at Cordell Flott. He can't even get on the field. He struggled to get on the field with Wink Martindale, and they passed up on names like Nakobe Dean for him. And Nakobe Dean has been a very good player with yet another division rival, the Philadelphia Eagles. Daniel Bellinger was also selected in this class. He dealt with some injuries his rookie season. Right now, he's buried on the depth chart. He's a solid tight end at best, but I believe that there's more upside with Theo Johnson. Micah McFadden, I like him a lot. I think that Micah McFadden is going to be a very good player long-term with the New York Giants. He may never be a top linebacker in this league, but he's been a solid player with the New York Giants in terms of going out there and being a massive hitter and just setting the tone for the entire game. Then you look at Deonte Banks. Now, this is where we get into a different draft class here. Deonte Banks, 2023. Deonte Banks had a very good rookie season underneath Wink Martindale. But we saw this year with Shane Bowen, hasn't been the same player, and they benched him for effort. Remember, Brian Dable was the same man to go out there and sit down. Your top paid wide receiver and Kenny Golladay many years ago. They benched Deonte Banks against the Steelers. Now, he still played this season, but he hasn't been the same player that he was his rookie year. And there's a lot of concerns that he may be a bust. I hope that that's not the case, and I really believe that he will be a better player if they moved on from Shane Bowen. He did not struggle with Wink Martindale that much. And when he did, it was just a bunch of rookie mistakes. They have the kid sitting back in zone. He's more so of a press man corner. And we've seen him have good games this year in individual assignments. It's just when you want him to go out there and be a main tackler in the secondary and you want your defense to sit back in zone the entire time, you're going to be asking for trouble because Deonte Banks is not known for doing that. You knew this when you selected him out of Maryland. This is a man that can go out there and be a top press man corner in this league, but you're not letting him do that right now. Instead, you're not catering to his strengths, you're catering to his weaknesses. John Michael Smith, you selected him in the second round. I think that he's going to be a very good player long term. He's showing a lot of promise at the center position. So finally, he has hit on an offensive lineman. I hope that he can be the center of the future. Jalen Hyatt, he's a mystery. He's yet to score a receiving touchdown in his career. He's really buried on the depth chart behind better wide receivers and Wan'Dale Robinson. You also have Malik Neighbors, who you selected in this year's draft class, who has been a phenomenal playmaker. And then when you look at it from another perspective, Jalen Hyatt is still not a bad football player. Then you have Darius Slayton in front of him also. So when I look at Jalen Hyatt, maybe with a different team, they can bring more out of him, or you possibly bring in another quarterback, and I'll get into the quarterback options in this video, what they should do with this offseason. Maybe they can unload, and maybe they can unlock Jalen Hyatt and his potential, but we'll see. But right now, Jalen Hyatt hasn't been that major deep threat that they were looking for with this organization. It's just a lot that's going on right now with the New York Giants in terms of them missing on those draft picks so far. Eric Gray, this is a guy that's not making much of an impact with the team. The same with Trey Hawkins and Jordan Riley and Owens and also Beavers. So when I look at it from this situation, it's hard to go out there and hit on those late round picks. I understand you're not hitting on picks round 5 through 7 because it's so hard to find gems late in the draft. But many teams do it. Many organizations do it. When you look at the disappointments on this draft topic right now, and you look at the situation with Daniel Jones, the fact that you extended him over Saquon Barkley, and I give him a pass for that because you're going to always pick the quarterback over the running back position. We saw this in this year's free agency. Not too many teams wanted to go out there and pay running backs top tier dollars. But when you do that, you have to be punished for that. And when I look at Joe Schoen, I don't believe that he can draft late. He can't go out there and give you those impactful players late in the draft. When it comes down to personnel decisions, obviously he doesn't know what the hell he's doing. He would have brought back Xavier McKinney. And speaking of Xavier McKinney, they did draft a safety in this year's draft class in Tyler Nubin. Hopefully he can be a very good player moving forward. He ended the season on IR, but he showed a lot of potential. He did not look like Xavier McKinney, but he doesn't look like a bad football player. They tried to go cheap around the roster because at the time, Daniel Jones was making a lot of money. And how did I come to that conclusion? Well, I watched the HBO Hard Knocks series, and it showed Joe Schoen in a bad light. He was around there complaining a lot, saying, hey, I had to deal with the Saquon Barkley situation once before. It took years off my life. Do I really have to deal with this again? We could possibly extend him, but it's not going to be for that much money because Daniel Jones is making too much money. For one, I understand why players and general managers and coaches hate to have cameras around because this painted Joe Schoen in a bad light. You're complaining about paying Saquon Barkley a lot of money. You're complaining about having to deal with his agent and having to deal with Daniel Jones. And then he came back to the next episode and he tried to justify his decision by not paying Saquon Barkley a lot of money. He came out and he basically said this right here. We need to figure out if Daniel Jones is our guy. We're paying him $40+ million a year. We don't want him to just hand the football off. Let's see what we really have. If you don't know what you have in your quarterback, why did you pay him that much money? I understand he made the NFL playoffs. And if you don't want him to go out there and hand the football off, you want him to throw the football all around the field, why not build the offensive line? He set Daniel Jones up for failure. And Daniel Jones was set up for failure from jump because he should have never went in the first round. It's little things like that that really painted Joe Schoen in a bad light for me, and I would have easily let him go after last season. But personally, that's just me. You may have a different opinion about this. Now, when I look at this year's draft class, it is a little bit better. I like the players that he did select. Obviously, Malik Neighbors is a phenomenal player. Tyler Nubin in the second round. Andrew Phillips at the cornerback position from Kentucky. We'll see if he can fully develop. You selected him in the third round. Theo Johnson from Penn State. There's a lot of potential there. If Brian Dable uses him just a little bit more in the red zone area and across the middle of the field, he could be a top receiving target with the New York Giants. I don't know if he will ever be a top receiving tight end in this league, but in terms of being on this team, he could be a very solid and productive player. Tyrone Tracy from Purdue. This is a guy that's a running back. He played wide receiver in college. I love this pick. For all the misses that Joe Schoen has had in this video that I've covered, this may be my favorite late round pick because he was able to go out there and give you a lot of good production at the running back position. The one problem was this: he fumbles the football too freaking much. And I really don't blame him for that, even though that is bad on him. He has to go out there and hold on to the football more times than not. The reason why I don't always just blame this on the player, he's used to playing wide receiver. And yes, he played running back in college, but he was primarily a wide receiver. You can motion him out, use him similar to Christian McCaffrey and to Alvin Kamara. And I'm not saying that he's going to be in the same conversation with those guys in the next few years, but the reason why I'm not as hard on him for his fumbling issues, he's getting hit by defensive tackle. He's getting hit by defensive ends and linebackers. When you're a wide receiver, you rarely get hit by defensive ends. You rarely get hit by defensive tackles unless you're running a bunch of jet sweeps. And even then, you're getting hit by the linebackers. So fumbles are an issue. He does have to be better, but there's a lot of upside here with him at the running back position. I know a lot of Giant fans right now, they may be upset. They look at Saquon Barkley and they're saying, hey, this kid went to the Philadelphia Eagles. He has over 2,000 rushing yards, and we got stuck with Tracy Jr. Tracy Jr. is a good football player. 839 rushing yards, 5 rushing touchdowns, averaged 4.5 yards a carry. He had over 1,000 yards from scrimmage. Give him time to develop. Will he ever be Saquon Barkley? I don't think so. But you don't have to be Saquon Barkley to be a very good running back in this league. And I do think that he will be a good player moving forward. So this draft class is already off to a hot start for Joe Schoen. I just want to see everything pan out together with the Giants instead of seeing stuff like this fly over the stadium. This happened late in the season, and it happened more than once. For the ones that don't know what this is a blimp. This is what a fan paid for. And he's saying, Joe Mara, please fix this mess, because the New York Giants ended their season being 3-14. And many people around the New York area, they wanted Joe Schoen gone. And some of them, they wanted Brian Dable gone also. Now, like I mentioned, I'm a huge Brian Dable fan. He worked with Brett Favre up close and personal when he was with the New York Jets. I know that's not saying much, but he did have a lot of high remarks being said about him from league circles. And we've seen him get this team to the playoffs with a lack of talent. And not only just that, he helped develop Josh Allen. Now, once again, Josh Allen is a freak athlete. He's Josh Allen. I don't want to come on here and disrespect him. Josh Allen is a great player, but Brian Dable was his offensive coordinator. That was one of the best seasons that he had in his career. Was it lightning in a bottle with Brian Dable? We'll see. But I do believe that Brian Dable is still a smart mind and he deserves a place in this league. And they should give him at least another year to be a head coach. And that's what John Mara has done. And John Mara, he does care about this team. And it's really gut-wrenching to just hear him talk, because he hates when this team is always bad. And he's coming from a nice place. The problem is this with John Mara. He is so incompetent at his job that it hurts his team and it hurts his fan base over and over and over again, because he doesn't know what the hell he's doing. He's done everything. He's went out there. He's brought in executives to be around him. He's brought in new general managers. He's brought in new coaches. Nothing can work. And even though I do believe on a personal level that John Mara could possibly be a nice guy, overall as a football mind, right now, he's not it. This is a Giants team. They have talent. They have Malik Neighbors, who just had a great rookie season. Theo Johnson has a lot of potential. I like Darius Slayton. I think that he's a solid wide receiver. He had a lot of problems earlier in his career in terms of dropping the football. You have Wan'Dale Robinson. Wan'Dale Robinson is such an interesting player. And back to the draft conversation, they selected Wan'Dale Robinson over George Pickens. George Pickens may have a lot of attitude problems right now with the Steelers, but he's a true number one. Wan'Dale Robinson is a good player, but he's not a true number one. And he may never be a true number one. And I do understand, coming from this standpoint, George Pickens coming out of Georgia was dealing with a lot of injuries, a lot of character concerns. But that's a big time hitter that you could have selected in the middle of the draft. But you did. You went with Wan'Dale Robinson, and Wan'Dale Robinson, his rookie season was cut short due to ACL injury. A lot of these wide receivers have been held back by terrible offensive line play and terrible quarterback play. You may ask yourself, how does offensive line play into wide receivers not having great seasons? The quarterback doesn't have enough time inside the pocket. He doesn't have enough time inside the pocket because the offensive line is terrible, and it limits the coach to what he can do with the offense. And this is what we have seen with Brian Daboll over the last few years. Hopefully, Jermaine and Andrew Thomas can stay healthy, and you have John Michael Smith continuing to develop at the center position. Now, I said a lot about the defense earlier in this video. I was really teasing you guys with Shane Bowen. Wink Martindale was done with his coaching staff. He was done with Brian Daboll. They had a lot of arguments behind the scenes. I know that Brian Daboll came out. He was joking about it. A lot of that stuff was true. Wink Martindale said right now that he's happier in college with Michigan because he's their defensive coordinator than he ever was with the New York Giants. And I wonder why. And I look at this defense now. They miss him. Shane Bowen is the man that you see right now on your screen. Shane Bowen is a terrible defensive coordinator. He should have never been hired in the first place. The defense this year, they could not stop the run, misusing players on the back end with your secondary. The New York Giants did not run into these problems when they had Wink Martindale as their defensive coordinator. Wink Martindale is the same defensive coordinator that went out there and gave Lamar Jackson a lot of problems with blitzing. Wink Martindale and Shane Bowen are night and day. Wink Martindale used a lot of blitzes, and he was coming with creative blitzes every single week, and he had clear-cut game plans for the opposing team. Now look at Shane Bowen. That's not the case. And you have a lot of Patriot fans right now. They may be waiting and saying, hey, is Mike Vrabel going to come over and bring over Shane Bowen? For Giants fans' sake, they may hope so. A lot of Giants fans, they want Shane Bowen going because there's no gap discipline. There's no gap responsibilities. There's not enough pressure coming from the secondary or even coming from the linebackers. This is a stale defense, and they run the same cover 2 man packages, the same Tampa 2, and they play a lot of zone. When you have a lot of players on this roster, they're used to playing man, and they're used to going out there, and they're used to blitzing. But you don't see that right now with Shane Bowen. He's a terrible defensive coordinator. He doesn't make adjustments, and it is time to move on. And I look at Brian Daboll. Whether you think this is fair or not, he's on the hot seat after next season. If the Giants only win 3 to 4 games, they're going to let him go. And the same with Joe Schoen. So when I look at Brian Daboll and I look at his coaching staff, you just fired your defensive backs coach, but you didn't fire Shane Bowen as I record this video. Let him go. Get rid of him. He's a terrible defensive coordinator, and it will help your team out long term. You could possibly bring in someone like Robert Saleh. Right now, he's the highest defensive name. If you don't want to bring in Robert Saleh, there's Coach Lou from the Cincinnati Bengals. He had a down year this year. He's better than Shane Bowen. You don't want to bring in Coach Lou? Fine. Bring in Dennis Allen. He's the former head coach and former defensive coordinator with the New Orleans Saints. As a head coach, he's terrible. As a defensive coordinator, he's one of the best defensive coaches to have in this league. You have a lot of top candidates out there. But my fear is that they will bring him back, and it will definitely hurt this roster moving forward. Things can change next season. But when I look at the Giants right now, Shane Bowen is the weakest coach that they have, and your defense is going to suffer every single year because of him. He's just a terrible defensive mind, especially with the Giants. Now, I also mentioned the quarterback options with the Giants moving forward. You're going to have money and cap space this year. Right now, they are the favorite to go out there and bring in Sam Darnold. And you may groan if you are a Giants fan. I will say this about Sam Darnold. I don't think that Sam Darnold is a terrible football player. Yes, he had a bad stretch the last 2 weeks against the Detroit Lions, against the Minnesota Vikings. Against the Detroit Lions and against the Los Angeles Rams, pardon me. And when I look at it from this standpoint, a lot of it is because he was holding on to the football for too long and the offensive line was not good. But Sam Darnold still has big-time potential to be a very good bridge quarterback with the Giants for the next 2 to 3 years. And you can sign him to a 2 to 3 year contract, and you can move off the contract after the second year. And you can still draft your quarterback in the first round with the 3rd pick. Now, the ideal fit here, in my opinion, would be selecting Shedeur Sanders with the 3rd overall pick. The problem is this. The Tennessee Titans, they have the 1st pick. They really need a quarterback. So they may go with Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. And the 2nd pick is the Cleveland Browns. Now, as I record this video, they still need a quarterback. They haven't made a trade. Deshaun Watson is still in this roster. He's come off of 2 Achilles injuries and a brutal shoulder injury the year before. They need a quarterback. And I don't see the New York Giants going out there and selecting a guy like Quinn Ewers in the 1st round. That would be asinine. So when I look at the bridge quarterback options here, you have Sam Darnold, you have Justin Fields, and I know a lot of you may roll your eyes. Justin Fields, very good athlete. The passing isn't there, But we've seen Brian Dable go out there and work with a project quarterback before in Josh Allen, and it worked out. The problem is for Brian Dable, he doesn't have 3 to 4 years left on his deal to stay with the Giants if they're bad for the next year or two. Sam Darnold right now will be the best quarterback in free agency. He can push the football deep down the field. He's aggressive, and he has solid mobility. You just hope that you fix his offensive line, and it's a quarterback-friendly system for Sam Darnold. You also have Russell Wilson. Now, this is a very interesting topic right here. Russell Wilson had conversations with the New York Giants before he signed with the Steelers. They wanted to bring him in, and they still had Daniel Jones on their roster. Russell Wilson is not the same player that he once was, but as a bridge option, I think he's solid enough, and he may be cheap. I don't think that Russell Wilson is going to go out there and ask for $30 to $40 million every single year. So now look at Sam Darnold. He will be the highest paid quarterback on this list. Justin Fields wouldn't be paid that much compared to Sam Darnold, and the same with Russell Wilson. They did not have the same seasons as a guy like Sam Darnold. You could possibly go out there and trade for Kirk Cousins. I would laugh, and at that point, if Joe Schoen entertains that, he should be fired if he picks up the phone. Look at the quarterback options. Shedeur Sanders in the draft is the way to go for me. But free agency hits before the draft. The draft doesn't come before free agency. So if you go out there and bring in a guy like Sam Darnold, you can still draft a quarterback. But I don't think the Giants are comfortable right there in the third spot. And they're trying to see what the Browns are going to do on draft day. They're trying to see what the Titans are going to do on draft day. That's how you lose all the best free agents at the quarterback position. But let me know in the comment section below, how do you guys feel about the New York Giants? And is the future still bright with this organization, with Joe Schoen and Brian Dable in charge? And when I look at Brian Dable, he doesn't go out there. He doesn't draft the talent. He's just a coach. It really comes down to Joe Schoen. Personally, this is going to be the biggest offseason in Joe Schoen's career, and the same with Brian Dable. But if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. If you like the video, hit the like button. Most importantly, I want each and every last one of you guys stay safe, stay positive. Thanks for the video, guys. God bless.